Yeah, so I think the first aspect is how many employees you have in the business, and I guess the nature and number of queries and help they need every day. If that goes above a certain level and they need quicker responses than what someone, external provider, I think that's a time to think whether, the business needs to switch from working from an outsourcing model to an in-house model. But I think also, you can continue to work with outsourcing beyond that, beyond the certain side as well. But I think it's more, I always think about what impediments are our employees having to perform their work. And if IT is a problem, then that's when you may consider to, bring someone in-house. So there are challenges with that. You've got to employ someone. They need to, develop their own system of how to manage tickets, and there's no backup as well. So, but eventually a growing business will get to a point where it needs to build in-house capacity. And the more you can, I would say, delay when that's happening, I think it's the better if it's working well with the outsourced company. But the more that you can be conscious of it, you can then be better prepared once you decide to do that.
So let me ask you, Stephen, have you ever been on the hook for managing IT in any of the businesses that you've worked at?
I would say no directly, but yes indirectly, because typically in a business, finance ends up always picking up the crap issues, as I say. They always seem to fall down the tree to finance, and sometimes inevitably, like a lot of IT issues come, and then you end up having to be the one shouting loudest to try and get some action to do so.
Indirectly, yeah. Well, what about you, Michelle? What are your thoughts?
As Stephen said, there always is a point where I think you switch from one to the other. Having said that, for the small to medium-sized space, it's a bit like in finance, trying to take a payroll in-house. It's always better outsourced because of the complexities around it, the issues you do not want to deal with, which is taxes and pensions and the queries of why is my tax changed from your employees. It's like, I don't want to deal with that. So every time I've managed an in-house payroll team, it's almost been the opposite. It's like, oh, this is, we don't need this for this size of company. Let's just outsource it. And it's always been cheaper and more efficient. And similarly for an IT department, I think when you're in a small, medium space, that you definitely need to have constant dialogue with that outsourced IT department effectively, and make sure that your scoping is in place to know when it isn't going to be appropriate anymore. But being constant dialogue with that outsourced company to see whether they are scaling as well, because maybe they can grow with you as a partner. And it's difficult because from my perspective, the businesses where in FinTech, I can see from Stephen it'd be slightly different, but in retail and the creative space where tech is actually not front and center of mind until it's a mission critical thing, or, we can't.
Something stops working.
Like you're trying to put a film out, you've got a deadline, and all of a sudden your rigging department can't compress the files enough. Your rendering has slowed down. You have to burst to the cloud and it's costing a load of money. That's when you start to make those kind of decisions about your investment in IT, whether that's in-house or whether it's not. There's all kinds of reasons. And I think that there is a sweet spot for all companies between the in-house and outsourced. But in my experience, in my industries, outsourced has always been better for small, medium-sized enterprises until they can't scale with you and you need a massive solution.
I would agree, Michelle, on the industry, because if you are a tech engineer heavy business, you may want to keep it in-house.
Exactly.
And so underlying comes down to your product and service and what you're.
I think that definitely the size as well. I think as you get to, you're starting to get into, in around sort of circa 200 employees, naturally you might find that complexity in your IT starts to be introduced. But until then, unless you're a business that can scale with that business, and, depending on what your model is, Obviously, I think, outsourced does work for, I think, the majority of the types of organizations that are out there, because of the fact that you've not just got somebody that's being an IT manager or a tech support engineer that's very much on their own, for that 50-person business that's there to do everything. You don't necessarily have that backup.
I do think it's also, in this day and age, now, definitely for smaller companies now, there is a bit more of a focus on actually being scared around compliance and GDPR and protection and IT security and risk. Sometimes for a small to medium-sized company, better, as I say, to be protected from an SLA perspective, outsource to somebody else, because I've been in a company where we had to we brought in a ISO expert, and of course that's a massive cost as well, because they are now in demand, costing a lot of money, rightly. They've got specific set skills, and put a massive burden on the payroll, which was kind of a little bit sort of unexpected in terms of cost. So sometimes you're right, it depends on the size of the company and where they're at in their life cycle, I think.
Yeah.